Awaken to the meaning of my heart, that to feel love and oneness is to live, and this the magic of our golden change is all the truth I know or seek, O sage. Good morning, listeners. Welcome to our Golden Change, a series of talks and discussions dedicated in the spirit of these words of Savitri. Today I am going to discuss an essay by the scholar Ayon Maharaj titled Toward a New Hermeneutics of the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Aurobindo, and the Secret of Vijñāna. I won't be going over all the interesting details of his argument, but using it as a springboard, I will venture into the perennial question regarding the relationship between God and reality, where God is meant as something transcendent, infinite, eternal, boundless, timeless, beyond space, unchanging, without cause, and unmanifest, while reality means the so-called opposite, that which changes, the transient, the world of forms, the world of names, the world of beings, of things, subject to arising and lingering a while, and then passing away. What is this relationship? Of course, there have been many ways of conceiving this relationship. Ayon Maharaj goes to the source being the spiritual experiences and textual interpretations of Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Aurobindo, two figures that many, if not most, would agree are avatara of our contemporary age. A brief background in the simplest of terms will be helpful here. There is a great, rich, and beautiful school of Hindu thought which goes by the name of Advaita Vedanta. Its main proponent and philosophical genius was Shankaracharya. What Advaita Vedanta teaches is that the highest level of attainment of spiritual realization is contained in the statement, I am Brahman, or a statement which means the same thing, thou art that, you are that one Brahman. Now, Brahman is simply a traditional term for God, in the sense I spoke of just a moment ago. The timeless, boundless, eternal, changeless reality. So, the trick of Advaita Vedanta is to discover for oneself experientially this truth, this ultimate truth, which is that I am not to be identified with changing things. Now, what changes? My body changes, the thoughts in my mind change, my hopes change, my fears change. In a way, everything I could point to changes. This is the truth given such distinction by Buddhist schools of thought. Everything that arises depends on other things that arise, and whatever arises passes away. And there is, for the Buddhist schools, no underlying reality to that. no foundation for that. Only the codependent arising and passing away of phenomena. Now, Advaita Vedanta says to us the experience of emptiness as form and form as emptiness at the heart of the Buddhist school is given this inflection, this Vedantic inflection, which is to say that underneath all these changes of finite and transient things and states, experiences, thoughts, identifications, that underlying this is Brahman. Or in other terms, is the self, is Atman. So Advaita Vedanta, or perhaps more directly we can invoke Ramana Maharshi here. They teach the path of Jñānayoga. That is the path of union with God through knowledge. The reason for our suffering is our identification out of ignorance with things that change. Our ignorance of our true nature, which is Brahman. And in Ramana Maharshi's case, over years, hundreds of people come asking him, what is the key to self-realization? How do I attain peace? How do I calm my mind? And what is his answer at every step of that way? He says, inquire, who am I? I think of myself as handsome or ugly, fat or skinny, young or old. But who is this I? From where do these I thoughts come? And what is at bottom ultimately true about this I? And the teaching of Ramana Maharshi and other Advaita Vedantins is to say, you are not those passing states, those passing thoughts. You are, as it were, the light of pure consciousness, which shines upon those objects, but is not those objects. Without the light, those objects cannot be seen. And here by objects, very broadly, is meant experiences, thoughts, objects in the world as well, identities, narratives about the world, narratives about ourselves, narratives about other people. You are not that. You are the light of pure consciousness shining upon these objects. And without that light, those objects would not even appear to exist. And I say now, appear to exist, because here is the rub of our question. The tendency of the so-called Mayavadan is to say, this world is an illusion. This world is unreal. This world is only real to the extent that the Brahman light shines upon it. And no doubt there is truth to this statement. A great truth. And the process of Jñānayoga, as it is more traditionally conceived, is to peel away layer after layer of avidya, ignorance, until one realizes that oneself is the light of pure consciousness, and unidentifiable beyond that. That one is that which cannot be placed in time, is not bound by space, is not caused, is not subject to birth and decay. And this is called realization of the self, Atma-jnana, knowledge of the self. With that little bit of background on Atma-jnana and Jñānayoga, we can return to Ayon Maharaj and Sri Ramakrishna. At the beginning of his article, Maharaj cites a dialogue from April 5th, 1844, in which Sri Ramakrishna outlines all of this and the distinction between Jñāna and Vijñāna in the simplest terms. Through the process of not this, not that, one realizes the Atman. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not these changing states of being. I am the Atman, the self behind all of this, which illuminates all of this, and which alone is real, while all the things that I am not are simply given existence, given light by what I truly am. But in contrast, Vijñāna means, for Sri Ramakrishna, a deeper and more intimate knowledge of the Supreme Reality. If you have only heard of the Supreme Reality, that is ignorance. If you have seen it, that is knowledge. But the one who has drunk of the Supreme Reality, that is Vijñāna. After having the vision of God, one talks to Him as if He were an intimate relative. That is Vijñāna, Sri Ramakrishna says. So what we have here is the difference between seeing that ultimate reality and drinking of that ultimate reality. It is the difference between understanding that at the basis of what is lies the Atman, the non-dual Atman or Brahman, while understanding that that supreme reality is also this. So there is a necessity to go through the process of viveka, to go through the process of discriminating between what is real and unreal, in the sense of Ramana Maharshi, of who am I? What is that fundamental basis called God? Beyond concept, beyond images, beyond doctrines. No. This is about discriminating between what is eternal and what is transient. To come to that root point. And to do more than just have heard this, but to have some deep feeling that yes, I am that pure consciousness, the one without second, whose light shines upon all this and gives it reality. That is self-realization. That is jnana. But what Sri Ramakrishna speaks to with Vijñāna is, for Maharaj, a still greater and richer spiritual knowledge. It is an ascent to the deeper and more comprehensive insight that God is at once the transcendent Atman and the Supreme Lord, who both rules and pervades the universe. And here we have the crucial addition, the drinking of the milk, as opposed to only seeing the milk. Which is not to say that, of course, Atma-jnana is anything simple or by any means easy to attain. No. But for Sri Ramakrishna and for Sri Aurobindo, the Vijñāni goes past the Jnāni. For where the Jnāni dismisses the world as unreal, says Maharaj, the Vijñāni realizes that God has also become the universe. So instead of climbing to the roof and getting rid of the stairs through this process of not this, not that, the Vijñāni realizes that the stairs are made of the same material as the roof. This creation, this universe, is not merely a framework of illusion, not just Maya, not something unreal, not something, therefore, to be escaped. Quite to the contrary, this world, this creation, down to the most physical bones of this matter, is a vessel of joy. Brahman is that one consciousness, that one Being-Consciousness-Bliss. And in this world, that one Being-Consciousness-Bliss not only gives light to what is, but is what is in the very marrow of this creation. And therefore, God is not simply the impersonal Atman, standing behind all, indifferent to all, not touching anything, not entering anything, but only from some high distance casting lights of truth and knowledge, which is true, but limited, because there is also the aspect of God as Supreme Lord, the personal Absolute, not only transcendent to, but immanent in the universe. Having said all this, we must make a practical observation, that in every genuine jnani one also finds a bhakta, a devotee. Ramana Maharshi said, Vikara and Bhakti are one, meaning that self-enquiry, the process of who am I, this inquiry, digging deeper and deeper into the self, stripping away the layers of ignorance, the false identifications. This process of self-enquiry, getting to the basis of the I thought, that process is not a process that is somehow radically distinct or different from bhakti, from devotion. Because devotion is that love for that very same basis, that self-same basis that one seeks through self-inquiry. In bhakti, there is an acknowledgement of God as that to which I am drawn, that which I love and which brings me into his circle, into his arms, the God who I adore and worship and thank in all times and places for the blessings of this world. That God whom I love is the selfsame God I discover is me through the process of self-inquiry. And there are many sources to verify this thought. But essential is to know it for oneself. And what we have here is the Vijñāni adding to Jnana the simple acknowledgement that knowledge and love go together. This is not a cold knowledge. Jnana is not a cold knowledge, could never be. The Vijñāni sees God in all the various manifestations and aspects, not merely the impersonal, formless God, the so-called Nirguna Brahman, that's the God without forms, but also the Saguna Brahman, the personal God, the God with form. And at this point, our very distinctions between what is form, what is formless, what is personal, what is impersonal, these distinctions will very quickly lose their philosophical relevance for us, because we will see that in the path of yoga, in the path of God realization, and especially in the process of bringing the light of the divine into the world, we come to understand that treating God as formless and approaching God through a form are united processes. We do not need to choose. When Sri Ramakrishna says infinite paths to an infinite reality, he also says the path is not the God. We can take the path going to Samadhi, the impersonal Atman, the non-dual Atman, which is inexchangeable, incomparable to anything that is. We can take that path. And in the very same breath, perhaps in the very same meditation, the very same movement, we can address our God as Lord or as Mother. The eternal and the play of creation are one in God. This is the higher Vijñāni knowledge. It is the taste of the Lord in the universe. Ayon Maharaj then proceeds to discuss Sri Aurobindo and a remarkable essay written around 1912 titled The Yoga and Its Objects, an early crystalline document accounting for and describing Sri Aurobindo's own yoga, or to be more precise, an early stage of his yoga before he has written Synthesis of Yoga and met the Mother. This is a yoga that is deeply informed not only by his deep study of the Vedantic scriptures and of the different philosophical schools of thought, but with his own spiritual experiences, including an experience in his jail cell the Alipore jail, when he saw that it was God who surrounded him everywhere. He says, I walked under the branches of the tree in front of my cell, but it was not the tree. I knew it was Vasudeva. It was Sri Krishna whom I saw standing there and holding over me his shade. I looked at the bars of my cell, the very grating that did duty for a door, and again I saw Vasudeva. It was Narayana who was guarding and standing sentry over me. Or I lay on the coarse blankets that were given me for a couch, and felt the arms of Sri Krishna around me, the arms of my friend and lover. This was the first use of the deeper vision he gave me. So this is precisely the Vijñāna that we have just spoken about from Sri Ramakrishna. This is the drinking of the Supreme Reality. And this is not an experience that can be faked. It takes effort in a way. It takes the effort to overcome the ignorances. And on the other hand, it takes a surrender to that Supreme Lord. To ask, Lord, give us that vision. Lord, give us that taste of reality. Clear away the obstacles that we might see you in your truest face. Not merely an experience of union with your transcendent reality as the non-dual Atman, but also as the Supreme Lord, as the movement of manifestation, and as we will later see, as the divine Shakti, as the energy, the force of consciousness for creation in the world. Not merely consciousness as illumining, which it also is, but consciousness as force of truth, where truth is itself a force of manifestation. In Aurobindo's essay, The Yoga and Its Objects, he outlines 3 stages. And the first stage is the Atma Jnana, knowledge of the one divine impersonal existence. And he acknowledges that from this perspective, the divine impersonal one may seem to be the only reality, and that everything else is Maya. This is the temptation, one could say. The temptation, having withdrawn from the transient, having liberated oneself from attachment to what changes, to have discovered I am that one Being-Consciousness-Bliss, to then deduce from that everything else is illusion, is unreal. But the question must always arise then, why? Why this? Why this purposeless illusion? Why this Maya where everyone struggles? Is it really there just for us to withdraw and escape? And the answer clearly is no. Because there is a second stage. And in the second stage, the impersonal realization of Advaita is superseded, built upon and gone beyond. It is the passage from seeing the milk to drinking the milk. It's the experience that even the names and forms are Brahman, says Aurobindo. And the third, final stage, one perceives all things as God. The Vasudeva Sarvam. All this is the divine play, and even more than just the divine play, because that could imply that the player is somehow outside, just rolling the dice. But no, an even richer sense of play, that the play is the player. Aurobindo says, the crowning realization of this yoga is when you become aware of the whole world as the expression, play or lila, of an infinite divine personality. When you see in all not the impersonal Sadatman, which is the basis of manifest existence, although you do not lose that knowledge, but Sri Krishna, who at once is, bases, and transcends all manifest and unmanifest existence. The reason, of course, for Aurobindo's referencing of Sri Krishna in the passage just cited is the central importance of Sri Krishna to the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of the Lord. For as Ayon Maharaj, in the rest of his essay, tries to show, in the Bhagavad Gita itself, there is a distinction made between Jnāna and Vijñāna, and that therefore the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Aurobindo are not based merely in their subjective experience and in their own personal realizations, but rather have a deep basis in the classic text claimed by so many schools, Hindu thought, and of so many devotees. In his later text, much more in-depth, but based upon the same thought about yoga, the same vision for yoga, in Aurobindo's Essays on the Gita, he draws out the same distinction, calling jnana essential knowledge, knowledge of one's own essence as the impersonal non-dual Atman, and Vijñāna as the more comprehensive or integral realization that, quote, the divine being is all. Maharaj summarizes, Vijñāna for Sri Aurobindo at once includes and surpasses jnana. The knowledge of the non-dual Atman, far from being the summit of spiritual experience, serves as the necessary foundation for Vijñāna, the still greater realization of God as at once impersonal and personal, at once immanent in the universe and beyond it. This more integral knowledge is indeed interpreted by Sri Aurobindo as a bhakti with knowledge. The Bhagavad Gita says, at the end of many births the man of knowledge attains me. Very rare is the great soul who knows that Vasudeva is all that is. Vasudeva Sarvam iti. So again, this knowledge of attaining the Lord is here not merely jnana or atma jnana. It is this vijñāna, this more intense knowledge, or what Aurobindo calls comprehensive or integral knowledge. In chapter 9, the Gita itself makes this distinction, saying, but to you who are not given to cavilling, I shall speak of this highest secret, which is jnana combined with vijñāna, by realizing which you shall be liberated from evil. And Aurobindo claims, says Maharaj, that the highest secret is the knowledge of the whole Godhead, which consists both in jnana and vijñāna. And again, the emphasis here is that it is from this standpoint of vijñāna that jnana, knowledge, and bhakti, devotion, can be reconciled. If now we return to our original question, we will see that we have found our way to a unique expression, a unique understanding and experience of the relation between God and reality. God, in the first step, is transcendent to the world. In our first gropings and meanderings and wonderings and imaginings of God, we are drawn irresistibly to the idea of something perfect, something high, something perfectly good, in the sense of removed from our categories of good and evil. We are drawn to the notion of the changeless, of something unborn, not subject to death. And the first step is to draw ourselves toward such thoughts. And from this perspective of Jnānayoga, to know that transcendent reality as ourselves. What the Vedic tradition calls Sat Chit Ananda, being, consciousness, bliss, that one stable source of reality, illuminating all things, giving all things their beauty. But in a second step, we discover that that very same transcendent reality is in this creation, is in the divine play. And that is the Vijñāna, to grasp the supreme divine mystery, that God is at once one with all that is, and yet exceeds it. God, in this sense, can be thought of as the magnet drawing all reality to God, and the filaments which are drawn to that magnet are themselves aspects and manifestations of God. God is pulling this reality, in a sense pulling himself to himself, pulling that seed of the divine in us closer and closer to his divinity, such that we can realize that divinity in this world and thereby divinize the world. To divinize life is the supreme ambition of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, and we now see the basic outline of one way to look at that path. To first realize oneself as transcendent to all, and then, or in the same breath, to realize that that transcendent reality is drawing all unto it. The vessel of the body, the instrument of the mind, the world-creating force of the will, our very strength of being, these are all gifts, blessings from the Supreme Lord, who has given us his essence, and who wishes for that essence to radiate and pervade reality. It already does pervade reality. This world is not merely a bog of suffering to be escaped, to be withdrawn from. Desire, as the cause of suffering in the Buddhist sense, yes, must be overcome. The egoism, the selfishness, the narrowness of view, the addiction to the body-mind complex, yes, these must be somehow overcome through processes of purification, of rejection of false movements, above all. Rejection of false movements. For we know, do we not? We know which movements are false and which are true. But it is not merely a negative path. It is not merely not this, not that. In fact, we are best served when instead of constantly troubling ourselves over our sin and what must be changed about us, although we must give these levels of our being all the attention they need, thousands of time after time after time, till these addictions and thought processes, egotistic patterns of behavior change and loosen their grip upon our spirit. But we can, at the same time, keep our eyes on the highest, on that magnet, and realize that we are a filament being drawn to that magnet. We are of the same essence as that magnet, and the things we touch, the objects we move, the thoughts we have, the things we create, and very especially the people we meet, the other animals we meet, the other life forms we meet, down to the very ground of the earth and the stars. This is all one manifestation of the one in each. Each is that manifestation of the one, drawn to the one. It is the one in the one. To see this calls up in us deepest love. Because at this level, one no longer sees merely the divisions, merely the separations. One sees a difference in one. One sees different living, breathing, changing, struggling, realizing expressions of the one. This is the Vijñāna. This is the integral knowledge, the comprehensive knowledge of the divine reality as both transcendent to this world and supporting it through pure acts of grace, moment by moment, and as also in the very substance of that world, drawing it to ever greater degrees of perfection and peace and strength and joy. It is a joy that can, in that sense, only be shared among ones. A bliss of awareness, an awareness of bliss, which we are and suffuses all things, and which we are here to help each other perceive. We are here to help bring down that perception of God and of God in all things. I thank you for listening to this video on the difference between Jnana and Vijñāna with reference to the nice article by Ayon Maharaj on Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Aurobindo. I look forward to returning to you for future discussions. May you go in peace with the vision of the Lord always at your horizon, and the love of the Lord always in your heart. Thank you.